Previously on Pretty Little Liars.
Hi guys, it's
Lauren Daisy.
Welcome back to my channel. It has been a hot minute. I have been working on my Pretty Little Liars book. I'm so excited to show you guys and be able to actually share with you, and that'll be next year, but it has taken up a lot of my time, which has taken away from being able to make videos, which is such a shame because that's literally my favorite thing in the whole world to do. But today I thought I could not let November go by without making this exact video, and today we are talking about Pretty Little Liars, the never-ending November. Now, if you don't know what this is the fact that in Pretty Little Liars, in the Pretty Little Liars universe, between the mid-series finale of season 3 and the mid-series finale of season 5, only 1 month takes place. Across 47 episodes, they allegedly take place within 1 month, the month of November. And so I thought to myself, how can I let November slip away without diving deep into the never-ending November? And today we're going to go through the timeline of the never-ending November, everything that happens in this magical month of November, and I actually went through, watched all of these episodes, and I counted how many days there are. So every time someone mentions this happened 3 days ago, this happened a week ago, if there's a time jump, if literally from scene to scene, okay, this is how serious it is, okay, from scene to scene, I went, right, it is like obviously morning time, they're at school, night time, it's bright again, they're wearing different colors, that's a day. I literally counted them individually. So by the end of this video, I'm going to tell you everything that supposedly happened in this 1 month and how many mysterious, days this 1 month has, because as we know, November has 30 days. Not in the Pretty Little Liars universe, it doesn't. No. So I want you guys to guess down below how many days you think are in Pretty Little Liars, this magical and never-ending November, because let me tell you, it's not 30. Like I mentioned, we actually begin our story, technically speaking, we're going to do a little bit of backstory. So the Halloween special, which is the 13th episode of season 3, This is the Dark Ride, a absolute fan favorite. This takes place on the 31st of October, and I think that's confirmed by the poster. This is another important note. When season 3 aired, it was actually October of 2012. Not in the Pretty Little Liars universe, it isn't. It is actually in October of 2011. Because the first season takes place in 2010. So when we first meet them, it is September of 2010, because it is the 1 year anniversary of when Alison went missing, which was September 1st, 2009. So now we jumped ahead a year, so we are in 2010. We then, through a couple of different indicators, we know that we have passed the threshold from 2010 into 2011. So season 2 takes place in 2011, and then we get a time jump between the end of season 2 and the beginning of season 3. So at the beginning of season 3, the lies make it very, very clear that they are entering senior year. It's what they're talking about in the Spencer's living room. They're talking about how they, all made it to senior year, and Emily mentions that not all of them, indicating that Maya obviously didn't make it to senior year. So we know it's senior year and we know it's 2011. The show does not go into 2012 until the second half of season 5, because we get the Christmas special in the middle of season 5, which obviously then indicates to us that it's December, it's the end of the year. And then when the girls come back, we know that it is now, I think it's 3 months it's been since the Christmas episode, potentially, or at least a month. So we know we're way into 2012 by that point. Pretty much all of season 2 and then all of season 3 and 4 take place in 2011, and then the first half of season 5, it takes place in 2011 as well, but not all of 2011, specifically just November. So that is where we're starting. Technically speaking, we're starting with This Is a Dark Ride, which takes place on the 31st of October 2011. And because we know it's 2011, I looked it up and this was a Monday. So we know that we are starting on a Monday and that the 1st of November was a Tuesday. So this is kind of our start point. Like I said, this is the 13th episode of season 3, and this takes place on the 31st of October. Then we're moving on to 3x14, and for the 14th episode we literally come head to head with our first plot inconsistency, because when Hannah and Caleb are talking, she is telling him about how Arya stabbed someone on the Halloween train when she was in the box. She stabbed them with a screwdriver. So they're like, if we can find who this injured person is, we could find out who was on the Halloween train. And Caleb specifically says the Halloween train was weeks ago.
Hang on, that was weeks ago.
Yeah, and it was also a dirty old screwdriver.
And that whoever that was, that wound is probably healed by now. Okay? So this somehow indicates to us as an audience that weeks have passed since the Halloween train. Weeks. Like at least 2, maybe even 3 Caleb is talking about. So by that stretch of the imagination, we should already be at the end of November. We should already be there. And the end of this timeline that I'm going to talk to you about today, because like I said, we have the Christmas episode, but the episode before that is Taking This One to the Grave. That episode takes place on Thanksgiving Day. And in 2011, Thanksgiving took place on the 24th of November. So if this is true, and Caleb says that it has been weeks since the Halloween train, realistically, we should already almost be at Thanksgiving. But no, we've got a whole nother, basically 2 seasons to get through first, in a matter of days apparently. Also in this episode, Mona mentions that she has been in Radley for 7 months, and we know that when she was first taken into Radley, we then had a 3-month break between, like, across the summer. And then, like, as things have been going on, this first half of the season has been progressing. That is now, I guess, we're up to like a good 7-month time since we first saw her go into Radley, which is fine. That makes sense. But again, with how that was kind of like set up, this would then again put us in at least mid to late November, more likely December, if she's really been in there for 7 months. So despite the fact that we are only at the very beginning of November in like terms of continuity, we're like already at the end of November. We're already in like season 5 at this point, basically. In terms of major plot points for this episode, it's not a huge episode. We have that Meredith starts teaching at Rosewood High. And also Mona returns to school. So she is kind of like coming back into the fold of society after, yeah, having spent 7 months at Radley, supposedly rehabilitating. Which we of course know isn't true, because we know she was on the Halloween train and she was sneaking out of Radley the entire time. And in this episode specifically, I counted that there were 3 days that passed, including the night when Mona goes to visit Hannah, and then when Mona actually returns to school the next day, and then the kind of aftermath day after that. So we have 3 days here. Then we're moving on to 3x15, and in this episode, Mona joins the decathlon team and competes with Spencer to be team captain, and Mona ultimately ends up winning. Also, Spencer mentions in this that they have an overnight competition in 1 month. Okay? 1 month they have an overnight competition, which would put that competition in December. But no, that competition happens 4 episodes from now. So yeah, like I said, we're in a complete time paradox.
We have a competition in like a month. Overnight travel. I'm not going to be able to survive a weekend with Mona.
And also in this episode, we had 3 days. Moving on, we have 3x16, Misery Loves Company. This is a big episode. We have lots going on here. So when we start this episode, Arya is sick. She says that Byron has left for a conference. And even though it's nighttime, which could indicate that it's the night of the day before in 3x15, I think it's a different night. I think it's possibly the next day, nighttime, because Arya wasn't sick in this episode, and also the girls are in different outfits, so I counted this as a brand new day, not continuation of the 15th episode. So major plot points for this episode: Meredith is actually drugging Arya and is making her sick in order to steal back Alison's diary pages from her, because she thinks that they incriminate Byron, and Meredith is dating Byron at this time, so she kind of wants to protect him, but she obviously takes it too far, literally drugs Arya, makes her sick. Emily and Hannah try to rescue her, and Meredith locks them in the basement. She also like holds a piece of glass like really tightly, so there's just kind of insinuations that she is not doing very well, and Byron confirms this. He says that she hasn't been taking her medication, and he says to Arya that Meredith is never going to bother them again, and this is the last time we see Meredith. Also in this episode, it is Spencer and Toby's 1-year anniversary, and this is also the episode where Spencer finds out that Toby is working for the A team, because we found that out on, oh, was it the Halloween train? Or was it the episode before the Halloween train? Oh, I can't remember now. But basically we found out Toby was A around here and had been A for a little while. But this episode, Misery Loves Company, is the first time that any of the liars actually find out. And yeah, it's Spencer on their anniversary and they end up breaking up. Oh, I forgot to mention, Byron also confessed in this episode that Alison was blackmailing him the summer that she disappeared. But Byron's just pretty much a big red herring. Nothing really happens with him. He wasn't really involved. Because it's Spencer and Toby's anniversary, this is actually quite a big point in terms of continuity, because we know from season 1 that Caleb and Hannah, they had sex for the first time the day before Toby and Spencer got together for the first time, like when they had their first kiss, assuming that's kind of when their anniversary is, I guess. In the episode Control A, Hannah is trying to figure out his password, and the last few numbers of his password are 1105, and she says that this is their anniversary, like the anniversary of the first time they had sex.
November 5th? You couldn't have just told me that it was the night that we...
This then puts that November 5th, which then in turn puts Spencer and Toby's anniversary on November 6th. Technically speaking, it is canon that the events of the 16th episode of season 3 happen on November 6th, despite the fact that Caleb said weeks had passed since October 31st. In the 16th episode, I counted that 2 days had passed, and the show, like the episode ends on it being Spencer and Toby's anniversary. So I'm considering the end of this episode to be November 6th. We're then going to move on to episode 17, and in terms of major plots for this episode, Spencer confides in Emily that she and Toby broke up, and Spencer ends up blurting out to Ezra that he has a son, Malcolm. She's obviously goaded into this by A, but because she's really heartbroken over Toby, she is still really harsh about it, and so it kind of creates a rift between her and Arya. And again, I counted 2 days for this episode. Moving on to 3x18. Like I said, she'd already created a bit of a rift with Arya, but then she starts being really harsh to Emily and Hannah as well, and just starts to kind of isolate herself from them. She ends up hiring a private investigator to track down Toby and see where he is, and that's kind of the main plot of this episode. Ezra, did he leave in the last episode or was it this episode? I can't remember. In one of these he like leaves to go and meet Malcolm, right? So he's becoming a dad. In 3x17 we had a scene where Hannah went to a lesbian bar and she ended up seeing Paige with Shauna. This is also our first introduction to Shauna. She was in the Pretty Dirty Secrets webisodes that aired prior to Halloween Train. I have a whole video on my channel about those webisodes, going through all of them if you want to watch that. But anyway, that's where Shauna was first introduced. But we don't see her until 3x17 when she's in the bar with Paige. Anyway, in 3x18, Emily mentions this to Spencer. She says that Hannah came to her and told her that she saw Paige, because she's dating Paige at this point, remember? Her and Paige are still together. And Hannah goes to her and says, I saw Paige in a bar with some girl. I don't know what to do about it. And Emily goes to Paige and asks her, and it turns out that she was just trying to get information from Shauna because she works at the costume shop. She's trying to find out who the Queen of Hearts is. All of that to say, the reason I'm bringing this up is because in that interaction where Emily is recounting it to Spencer, she says Hannah saw Paige with a girl last week. Last week. So now we have a week gap, right? 1 week between 17 and 18.
Last week, Hannah saw Paige with another girl.
Again, in this episode, I counted 2 days. I think you could technically count it as 3 days, but I think the girls just changed clothes based on how they were talking. It sounded like it was the same day and they had just changed outfits, so I only counted it as 2.
Okay, that was so annoying. So for the first few bits of this video, even though I had my mic and I was speaking into it, it wasn't plugged in properly. Hopefully the audio wasn't too horrendous. Fingers crossed you were able to make it to this point in the video where the audio is now actually good. So in the 19th episode, in terms of major plot points, we have that Hannah finds out that Caleb's uncle is actually his dad. Spencer flirts with Andrew in that kind of weird thing with the cupcakes and the quiz and that funny scene. And then we also have that she takes Ren to this decathlon meetup, like I said, that overnight one that we talked about, that was supposedly a month from episode 15, but is happening now in episode 19. And she takes Ren to this decathlon meeting and she actually ends up attacking Mona. Then Emily and Jason are looking for evidence that there's a connection between Wilden and Allison, and they end up finding it. There's a picture of Allison, Wilden, and Cece, and they are going to try and like take it, but then the lift or the elevator crashes, and Emily is able to get out, but Jason falls right to the bottom, and we see him in like a hospital bed, but then he disappears from the hospital bed. So we have that. And we also have in this episode that Arya kisses Ezra's brother Wes while he's out of town meeting Malcolm. So yeah, like I said, based on what Spencer said in this episode, this should be technically a month from 3x15, which again would put us in December, but apparently we're not. And then in this episode, I counted just 1 day. Now we're moving on to episode 20. And again, another big hitter. We have that Ren and Spencer kind of reconnecting after she met him in that bar, and they end up kissing. They end up going on like a little mini date and they end up kissing, and Ashley ends up hitting Wilden with her car. In episode 20, I just counted 1 day. Now, for episode 21, this is kind of Spencer's big reveal to the liars about Toby being on the A-team. However, again, she says to the liars that she has known about Toby being on the A-team, helping Mona, for a few weeks.
Yeah, I've known for a few weeks. Why didn't you tell us any sooner?
So yeah, supposedly between November 6th and here at the 21st episode, we have, again, she's known about this for weeks. So again, we'll probably just give that a good 2 weeks at least. So again, this should put us, if this is November 6th, she's known about it for 2 weeks. We're, again, way closer to Thanksgiving than the timeline leads you to believe. Another plot point of this episode is that Arya meets Malcolm, like properly, and she babysits him, and Ezra's kind of, becoming a dad now, and how she's trying to kind of navigate that whole situation. They also have that A puts Wilden's car into Hannah's garage, again, to try and make Ashley look guilty, and they see the video in there. And so she gets Aria to help her push Wilton's car into the lake. Then, last but not least for this episode, Spencer is lured into the woods by Mona, where she finds a body that she believes is Toby. It has his tattoo, it's got a motorcycle helmet and like a crashed motorbike. And so she thinks that Toby has died, and this just absolutely sends her over the edge, breaks her, and she ends up being admitted into Radley. And in this episode, I counted 2 days. So now we're moving on to the 22nd episode of season 3. And in this one, not really a lot happens, to be honest, but Spencer is under a 24-hour evaluation at Radley. So we have kind of like the first day of that shown in 21, and then for the 22nd episode it is 2 more days. The only other funny like continuity error in this episode is that Emily meets Olympic swimmer Missy Franklin like in the brew, but like I said, this is still November 2011 and Missy Franklin didn't debut in the Olympics until London 2012. So yeah, I think it's funny that they put pop culture references in here in like the show, but in reality those things technically wouldn't have happened yet because it's 2011. And then we have the 23rd episode of season 3, and in this episode the other liars go and they visit Spencer at Radley, and Malcolm is abducted. He's picked up from school. I guess it is an abduction. He's picked up at school by somebody other than Aria, who they believe is A, and Aria actually ends up finding him at a carnival. And in this episode, I counted 3 days. Now moving on to the season 3 finale. So that is the 24th episode of season 3. And in this one, at the beginning, Aria says, oh, Spencer is still the same as Spencer that we saw last week.
She's the exact same Spencer that we saw last week. Oh, the Spencer we saw in Radley was not the Spencer right now.
Ezra also mentions that Aria is graduating in 7 months. And obviously, I don't have the best knowledge on the American school system, so feel free to correct me in the comments. But from what I Googled, it seems that US high schoolers typically graduate in May. And again, 7 months back from that, if we count backwards, this does line up with it being November. So in terms of major plot points for this episode, Aria ends up breaking up with Ezra. Ezra needs money to obviously support Malcolm, and their relationship is stopping him from being able to teach. So she breaks up with him, and he then begins teaching at Rosewood again. So then later in this episode, Hannah is babysitting Malcolm, and she's like asking him about the person that took him to the carnival. And he says that it was Aria's friend, Allison. And when she ends up like showing pictures, then it turns out that Allison that he's talking about was actually Spencer. And Spencer ended up joining the A-team as a double agent. So that she and Toby could be together and she could try and help the girls and figure out who is running things, because it's not Mona anymore. There's kind of like a new Uber A, red coat. She's the one that's running the show. So initially she isn't going to tell the girls this, but then she ends up doing it because they kind of catch her out, and they set up this plan where at the Thornhill Lodge, they're going to, find out who Redcoat is. She's supposed to be there. But then the cabin gets set on fire. I'm going to do a whole video about the lodge fire and everything because it's very confusing about who was there, who did it, like what happened. So don't worry, I'm going to do a whole deep dive on that. Basically, the lodge gets set on fire. Spencer thinks that she sees Redcoat getting off a plane. Toby is also outside keeping watch while the other girls are inside with Mona. And they're the ones that get trapped in the fire. And then they are pulled out of the fire. Mona and Hannah both insist that it was Ali that pulled them out of the fire. And Aria and Emily are like, that's crazy. Allison's dead. In this episode, I counted 3 days. So now we're entering into season 4. We have spoken about 11 episodes of season 3. Season 3 has 11 episodes. Okay? But I actually counted 24 days. So these are only the days that I actually counted. So like for each individual episode, this doesn't even include the supposed breaks that they talk about, like the 2 weeks, the 1 week, the 2 weeks. At the end, I'm going to do a total of the days that I actually counted, like I physically saw as the episodes went on. And I'm also going to do a separate total that includes these like periods of time that are talked about but not actually seen. And now, you might be thinking to yourself, Lauren, surely this can't be right. What makes sense is that the Halloween train was October 21st, 2011, but that when Mona dies, it's Thanksgiving 2012. Yes, that would make far more sense. If this was 2011 and we went through all of this and somehow we ended up at Thanksgiving 2012 at the end of this timeline, that would make perfect sense in terms of the amount of days, the continuity, yada, yada, yada. You know, like the first 2 seasons basically take place over a few months. I think each season is supposed to be about 2 months each or something like that. That would make sense. This is the issue. The issue is that they explicitly say that it's senior year in the first episode of season 3.
To making it to senior year. Yeah.
So since their graduation and their prom are in the last few episodes of the first half of season 6, it simply cannot be Thanksgiving 2012. It has to be Thanksgiving 2011. It has to be November 2011. And like I said, the show doesn't move into 2012 until the 14th episode of season 5. So here's the thing. This could have been completely solved if the Christmas special had been a flashback. Because the only thing that truly puts all of this in November is the fact that Mona's death and the mid-season finale of season 5 take place on Thanksgiving Day. They explicitly take place on Thanksgiving Day, and obviously the next episode is the Christmas special. Those are the only things that place all of these events in November. If they had just made the Christmas special a flashback or had the Christmas special in season 6 instead, this wouldn't exist. This wouldn't exist. And the timeline, I mean, it would be perfect because we have the whole thing with Wilden that I'm not even going to get into in his age. But relatively speaking, this would all make a lot more sense. We're starting on season 4. Obviously, we're starting with the first episode of season 4. And this episode picks up immediately from the night of the series finale. So I didn't add a new day onto the tally because it's the same day. Then later, even though the girls have like changed outfits and everything, it is still the next day. Because Emily refers to them finding Wilden's car last night. So even though everyone looks quite different, and in this episode, Ashley Benson is wearing a wig because she'd actually dyed her hair. So she looks quite different to how she did in the series finale. It is technically supposed to be the next day. Literally just one day after the series finale is kind of the main day that all the stuff in the first episode takes place. So major plot point for this episode is that when they drive back past the church, they find out that Wilden is dead and they see his body. We also have Wilden's funeral in this episode, which even though I technically only counted 2 days that we actually saw, there must have been a time in between like the day when they find his body and his funeral. Like, surely there has to be time in between that. Like, in the UK, I think it's usually at least a week, sometimes 2 weeks between someone dying and their funeral. But I think in the US, from what I was able to find online, it seems quicker, like less than a week, maybe like 4 days. So you guys do seem to have a bit of a quicker process than we do. But that still puts at least a few days between the morning of them seeing his body and when they attend his funeral later in this episode. There has to be some kind of time jump there. Now we're moving in to episode 2, and this was a little more tricky. It's sort of tricky to tell if the opening of this episode is the night of Wilden's funeral, because that's where we left episode 1, or if it's a different day, because they are all dressed differently, but it could easily be that night and they've obviously just changed out their funeral clothes. And Spencer's eye makeup is the same. And I feel like Spencer doesn't really wear makeup super heavy that often. So that leads me to believe it's the same day. But also Hannah mentions that she called her mum the day before yesterday. But at Wilden's funeral, she said she spoke to her yesterday morning. So it's tricky. You can either go with like the Hannah version, in which this is now the day after Wilden's funeral, or with the continuity of Spencer's eye makeup and the fact that they're still discussing the funeral, discussing that they found Ashley's phone in the casket. It makes me think that it's the same day. Again, it then seems that the next day we see is directly after that night. Like some of the episodes, it seems like maybe days pass. Like even as we're watching one episode, it seems like maybe there's a few days that we end up missing. But for this episode, it seemed pretty consistent, that it was like the next, like each scene where they were in different clothes, it was the next day. And Hannah mentions that the day after is a Saturday. She goes to meet Spencer and she's like, you know, what are you doing at 10 a.m. on a Saturday? Which then puts Wilden's funeral on a Wednesday. So also in episode 1 that I forgot to talk about, Toby is still working with A, because A is kind of promising that they're going to tell him what actually happened to his mum and that his mum didn't take her own life. And so he wants to find out more information about that and is using A to do so. Mona had taken the girls into the new A lair, which was an RV, and her and Hannah had gone and hidden it. But Toby had gone to the location and taken the RV and given it to A. So the RV's gone, but the girls don't know that. And then when they go back to see it, it's disappeared, but they don't know that Toby's the one that has taken it yet. Also there, A attacks Mona, and in attempting to save her, Emily pushes her and Aria out of the way, and she lands on a rock on her shoulder, and she really hurts her shoulder. Also in this episode, Aria meets karate or jiu-jitsu instructor, kickboxing instructor, Jake. So this is his first appearance, and in this episode I counted 2 days. Like I said, I feel like we must have maybe at least 4 days between Wilden's body and the funeral. To me that just makes sense. Okay, now we're moving on to episode 3. Not a huge amount in this episode. They go and they meet the mask man, as I call him, the guy who did the mold of Allison's face and ended up making the Allison masks, and then makes a mold of Emily's face in order to give them information about Allison. Toby confesses to Spencer that he was the one that moved the RV because he's trying to figure out what happened to his mum, and she agrees not to tell the girls and that she will kind of help him investigate. So that's kind of what they're doing in this episode. Emily, because of the injury to her shoulder, she actually has to give up swimming, at least for now. It kind of throws her whole life plan into question, because that's what she was going to do. She was going to go get a scholarship, swim at college, and maybe the Olympics. They never really say what she wants to do with it, but that's kind of the plan, I guess. And now she's kind of having to rethink that whole thing. Also, Ella, Aria's mum, ends up moving to Austria. I literally just went to Vienna, so in my Ella era, they end up moving, her and Zach, who is a guy that she started dating in season 3, in the first half of season 3. And he says he could be living there for up to a year. And she's like, oh, okay. But she literally comes back at the end of season 4, which again, as we know, takes place in November, so they weren't there for a year. And in this episode, we also have 2 days. Episode 4, again, a bit of a filler episode. I counted 3 days for this one, and the only real noticeable thing that happens in episode 4 is that the Fields family gets family services called on them because they think something is happening to Emily in the house, because she ends up taking painkillers to try and be able to swim, and she injures herself. And because they see Pam yelling at her outside of school about it, they, I guess A, reports them to family services, and with the injury on her shoulder and the yelling and all that stuff, it doesn't look great. But this whole thing just kind of goes away. Like, Wayne comes back because of it, but nothing really comes of it. Like, they're absolutely fine. We're moving on to episode 5. And while I only counted 2 days in this episode, there must have been a jump between this episode to this one, right? There must have been a jump, I think, between episode 4 to episode 5. I'm gonna assume at least a few days, like maybe, I don't know, maybe 3 extra days, because we see Melissa, right? Spencer confronts her at the masked man's place because he also has a mask of Melissa, right? She confronts her. That's that night. And then this morning, when we start episode 5, Veronica mentions that Melissa has just started her internship in London. So we must have had at least a couple days for her to like pack, to fly to London and to actually start her internship. Like, she wouldn't have started it just as soon as she got off the plane. So I'm assuming we've got about a 3-day jump between episode 4 to episode 5. Veronica also mentions in this morning scene that she has hired a college counselor for Spencer because she didn't get into UPenn on early admission. And so she's also had time between this episode, because episode 4 is when Spencer tells her that she didn't get into UPenn. And episode 5, again, a few days must have passed because she had time to hire a college counselor, but also that college counselor had time to create a whole plan. Like, he has a whole booklet and it says like created or curated for Spencer Hastings. So yeah, like I said, definitely a bit of a time jump going on here. Oh, that was it. In this episode, in episode 4, Zach asks Ella to move to Vienna with him and she's not sure. And then in this episode, she gets attacked by wasps. And then Arya convinces her to go to Vienna. So she actually moves to Austria in episode 5, not episode 4. That was my mistake. Also, how freaking cute is this jumper? I got it when I went to Liverpool Comic Con. If you didn't see my previous video, I was able to go to Liverpool Comic Con and actually meet Troyan, Sasha, Keegan, and Tyler, which was super insane and fun and exciting. So if you didn't see that, go back and watch that video because it was like my whole kind of experience. But this jumper was one of the things that I bought. This was the only one they had left. It's in like a 3XL, but I was like, I need it, I want it, gimme. I think the brand's on Instagram. I think they're called like Wish Upon Threads. And yeah, it's super cute. Not sponsored. They're just a small business that had like a stall, so I thought that was so cute. Like, if you guys like PLL merch, support a small business. Anyway, yeah, Ella's attacked by wasps. What was I saying? Ella was being attacked by wasps. And this is the episode where they go on the college visit. So this episode is called Gamma Zeta Die. And Emily and Spencer end up going on this college visit. Spencer's more concerned with, you know, figuring out what happened to Allison and why she was around this area, whereas Emily's actually kind of interested in the school because, like I said, she's kind of rethinking her whole college plan. Then finally, at the end of this episode, Hannah finds a gun in Ashley's wardrobe, but at this point, she's starting to suspect that Ashley was the one who killed Wilden. So she takes the gun and attempts to bury it at the college campus, but obviously the police are like, what the fuck are you doing? Obviously it was a setup, so A calls the police, and the police catch Hannah trying to bury the gun, and they arrest her for tampering with evidence. So in the opening scene for the 6th episode, Emily mentions that it has been 2 days since they arrested Hannah.
And 2 days ago, A called the cops on you. This is a setup. Yeah, that was just 2 days ago.
So she's just been in the house, like Tom and Ashley have been trying to figure out this whole thing, because it turns out to be Tom's gun. And he's like, why do you have it, Ashley? It turns out Ashley took it, but she said she didn't shoot Weldon. So it's a whole thing. But Hannah is basically waiting for the charges to be dropped against her before she can go back to school. And yeah, like I said, Emily mentions that this was 2 days. So we have a 2-day time jump between episode 5 and episode 6. So major plot points in Under the Gun. We have that Ravenswood is introduced for the first time. Toby and Spencer go there. Also, they do find out from Spencer that Toby was the one that stole the RV, so they're angry at her for not telling them about it. And finally, Ashley gets arrested for Weldon's murder at the end of this episode. And I counted 4 days, and that includes like the 2 that we didn't see, because they are like confirmed through Emily talking about them, if that makes sense. For the 7th episode, it opens at night, but I don't think this is the same night Ashley was arrested, because all the girls are there, everyone's dressed different, Hannah's in different pajamas. So I counted this opening scene as like 1 day, and I ended up counting 3 days for this episode. And in terms of major plot points, there isn't a lot. It's kind of just Hannah dealing with the fact that her mum is now in jail. But at the end of this episode, A crashes a car into Emily's house. Now moving on to episode 8. And in this episode, Mona ends up falsely confessing to Weldon's murder in order to try and protect Ashley. And for this episode, I only counted that 1 day occurred. Another timeline inconsistency that I found funny is that in the 8th episode, Aria and Jake, they watch a trailer for Insidious 2.
Insidious 2. It opens next weekend. You wanna go?
Sure.
Which, like I said, we're in November 2011, and Insidious didn't come out until 2013. 4x09. This episode picks up directly after Mona confesses, so it's literally the next day. Now, one of the major plot points of this episode throws another spanner. And throws another spanner in the timeline works, because in this episode, it's Emily's birthday. And Emily's birthday is November 19th. And we have Emily's birthday party. That's kind of where all of the big drama in this episode takes place. But it takes place the day before Emily's birthday.
Talk about your birthday. It's not until tomorrow.
Paige is like talking to Emily about her birthday, and Emily says, oh, it's not until tomorrow. And Paige says, oh, well, you know, we'll do something tonight. And then she throws her a surprise party. So we know that this episode takes place, I only counted 1 day, so this is the whole day. And it takes place the day before Emily's birthday, which makes this November 18th in terms of the canon of the show. I'll be honest, I don't know where this piece of information came from. It is just on all the Wikipedia. It's like Emily's Wikipedia, her Pretty Little Lies wiki page, all of like Reddit, anywhere. I could not find like a real like source from the show, or like I don't remember it from the books that her birthday was November. I think her birthday might even be different in the books. Anyway, somehow, somewhere, the 19th of November became Emily Fields' birthday. The only 2 confirmed dates I think we get are November 6th and November 18th, meaning that only 12 days have passed in this whole insane timeline. Technically speaking, only 12 days have passed. But yeah, episode 9, 18th of November. Only 1 day passes. At Emily's birthday, Jenna attends with Shauna, and we find out that Jenna and Shauna are like maybe dating or just friends, or, you know, Shauna's just helping her. And Jenna is actually blind again, or at least she's like very, she's got like quite bad tunnel vision now, because in the beginning of season 3, everyone finds out that Jenna can see again and her surgery worked. But now, cut to the beginning of season 4, she is losing her eyesight again and she is blind again. Ashley ends up being released on bail. So she's allowed to go home while she awaits her trial because of everything that happened with Mona. Speaking of Mona, Mona also goes back into Radley because, you know, of the confession that she made. Maggie tells Ezra that she is going to be moving away with Malcolm, which obviously leaves him very heartbroken. He's become very attached to Malcolm and being his dad. So he's a bit confused as to why she like just wants to move away. At Emily's party, Jenna is pushed into the lake and Emily goes in and pulls her out and is able to save her life. And Shauna ends up telling Spencer at the hospital that the person Jenna is so afraid of is Cece. So they think maybe Cece pushed her in and potentially Cece is A and Redcoat. Now, moving on to episode 10. Again, only counted one day for this episode. And in this episode, Ezra actually finds out that Malcolm isn't his. So within a span of a month, he's found out that he has a kid and that kid is not his. And also Aria and Jake, who I mentioned earlier, the fitness instructor, they are actually like properly kind of like dating now. And they have, I think they're not their first kiss because she accidentally kisses him, like when they first meet. But I think this is like their first proper kiss in this episode. And Emily also ends up moving in to the De Laurentiis house while her house is being fixed because Jessica moved back to town. Oh my god, did she move back to town in the second half or the first half? I think she moved back to town in the second half of season 3. I can't remember. Anyway, she's back, living in the De Laurentiis house, and now Emily and Pam are also living in the De Laurentiis house while they wait for their house to be renovated.
Okay, so then we have the 11th episode, and in this episode I only counted again one day, and in this episode it's the episode with the hoedown, which is one of my absolute favourite episodes. I just think it's so fun, and so yeah, the hoedown. We also meet Travis in this episode, and Travis tells Hannah that he actually has proof that Ashley didn't kill Wilden, so he ends up coming forward, going to the police, and, you know, telling them his side of the story. Then we're moving on to the mid-season finale. This is Now You See, Now You Don't, and in this episode, we have 2 days. Now, again, it's the mid-season finale, so this is a bit of a doozy of an episode. Firstly, we have that Ashley is released. She's like, all the charges against her are dropped because they kind of prove that she couldn't have been there. She says what happened was that she dropped the gun. She took the gun there for protection. She dropped it and she ran away. Then whoever actually did kill Wilden came after that because, yeah, like I said, Travis could corroborate that Ashley had left. Whoever then came after that killed Wilden with Tom's gun, but that it wasn't Ashley. So yeah, she's let go. All charges dropped against her. While chatting, as Ari's kind of feeling a bit distant from Jake because they're not really into the same things, she goes to Ezra to talk to him because she finds out that Malcolm isn't his. So she's like, you know, like, you can still talk to me about it even though we're not dating, but this leads to them kissing even though she is still dating Jake. The lies then go to Ravenswood. They chase Redcoat around, find out that Cece is one of the Redcoats, but the other Redcoat leads them to a lair, and they believe that this Redcoat might be Allison. And when they're in the lair, they think it's A's. There's, you know, surveillance of them everywhere. But then at the end of the episode, it's revealed that this is Ezra's lair. So it's like, is Ezra A? Why does he have all this? Like, why is he following the girls? You know, what's going on here? And Grunwald, who is a kind of psychic lady that Allison was talking to, tells the girls that she actually pulled Allison out of her grave the night she was buried alive, basically confirming everyone's sort of suspicions that Allison is indeed alive. Now we're moving on to Grave New World, which is the Halloween special for season 4. It also is our last ever Halloween special that we get, and this one is our first one where no days pass, like technically speaking, because the party that they go to is the one they find out about the night they find the lair. So it just carries on from them finding the lair to them getting their party outfits and going straight to the party we see in Grave New World. So no new days here. In terms of major plot points though, we have that Caleb comes to Ravenswood, and this is where the spin-off Ravenswood starts. If you want to know about Ravenswood, what happens in it, like the tea there, then I have a whole video, deep dive on Ravenswood, the kind of spooky spin-off that Caleb is the star of. But this is kind of set up, it's a backdoor pilot for that episode. So we meet like Miranda Collins, who is the other lead star, and we kind of learn a bit about them, and Caleb leaves with Miranda to then go and be in Ravenswood. But obviously also the big insane moment at the end of this episode is that the girls actually see Alison in the flesh for the first time, the iconic "Did you miss me" scene in Spencer's garden. The 14th. Oh no, oh no. Oh gosh, it's all happening, guys. Now we've got the 14th episode, Who's in the Box? And there are actually 11 days in this episode. I will explain how. So, the opening scene is still the same night / morning after as Grave New World. Okay, so that's one day. Then there is a 1 week time jump. A 1 week time jump that takes place in this one episode. So it's not even a time jump between here to here, really. I mean, I guess it kind of is. Okay, let's go with here to here. So yeah, there's a 1 week time jump in episode 14 between when they find out Alison is alive and kind of them still just like figuring out what they're gonna do, right? Caleb actually comes back from Ravenswood. So he's been in Ravenswood this whole week, and he does come back, but only for him and Hannah to break up and for him to go back to Ravenswood. So this actually is the Ravenswood mid-season finale. So we had, after Grave New World was when the first episode of Ravenswood aired, then Ravenswood aired weekly, and then it was their mid-season break, then Pretty Little Liars came back and Ravenswood came back. So What's in the Box aired, and then the 6th, I think it was, episode of Ravenswood aired directly after that. So Caleb went back to Ravenswood, and yeah, him and Hannah broke up. In this episode, they also meet Sarah Harvey's friends because they find a girl called Sarah Harvey online who had disappeared around the same time as Alison, so they think it could be her. But when they actually speak to the friends, they realise she went missing the day after Alison, not the same night. So it doesn't make sense with the timeline, meaning that Sarah Harvey isn't the girl in the grave. Also, during this whole time, Arya is cheating on Jake with Ezra. So there's also that. Just separate, right, of this. So let's just do a little block of time, right, for Ravenswood. Because the events of Ravenswood, we don't really know how long they take, but at least the first half, right, of Ravenswood takes place in this week-long time jump, okay? Then we've got like the next 5 episodes of Ravenswood. So Ravenswood probably takes place over no more than a month, I would say, like no more than a month. But Caleb does return. He does return before the Christmas episode. So somehow he spent a whole month, right? So Caleb is gone for what? At least 2 weeks, if we judge that the first half of Ravenswood is a week, the second half is also a week. Let's just go with that. But so much happens in that time. It would be crazy for it to happen in 2 weeks. So anyway, I'm going to say he's gone for like 2 to 4 weeks. Also in Ravenswood, Miranda dies. Spoiler, sorry. If you didn't know, in the second episode of Ravenswood, Miranda, who we meet in Grave New World, she actually dies. And not only does Miranda die, but Caleb almost dies. He also almost dies. Actually, I think he almost dies before he comes back and breaks up with Hannah. I think he dies in that 7 weeks, in that 7 days. So between, is that right? I can't remember now. Between him going to Ravenswood in this episode and 1 week passing, he dies almost, and basically wants to stay in the afterlife with Miranda, but she ends up convincing him to go back to the world of the living. And he basically finds out that he and Miranda are like soulmates, and it's this whole thing. If you want to know, like I said, if you want to know about Ravenswood and the lore and the tea of it, then I have a whole deep dive on it.
So yeah, That all takes place in Ravenswood, potentially within like a week or 2 weeks. Then we have 4x15. And in this episode, I only counted one day. In the previous episode, episode 14, Peter told Spencer not to talk to Jessica De Laurentiis. And then in this episode, episode 15, she mentions that it's been 3 days since he told her not to speak to Jessica. And adding that up with the days that I counted means that this episode, episode 15, takes place directly after episode 14. Honestly, nothing really happens in this episode. It's more of a filler episode. The only notable thing is that they think they know where Allison's hiding, but then they get like stopped by A, and then they stop at Ezra's cabin, but Arya is hiding the fact that she's seeing Ezra again from the girls and obviously from Jake. So then we're moving on to the 16th episode. And in this one, I only counted one day. In this episode, Arya breaks up with Jake properly, and yeah, like I said, is obviously seeing Ezra. And Jake warns her about Ezra, saying that he saw her yelling at a woman and that she should be careful around him. Also, Allison reaches out to Emily and is going to meet up with her, but then Spencer ruins it and scares Allison away. And also Hannah kisses Travis for the first time. So Travis, that I mentioned from the hoedown, he like comes over, he like picks up the girls from where they are in Ezra's cabin and like whatever. And him and Hannah kind of start to grow closer and they kiss for the first time in this episode. So episode 17. In this episode, I counted 3 days. But again, it seems like a couple days have passed between the 16th episode and the 17th episode, because there are a couple things that they mention that kind of lead you to believe that. So the first of which is that Emily is still mad at Spencer because in the end of this episode, so this night, is when Spencer messes up the whole thing and scares Allison away. This one opens with it being nighttime, like still, but it has to be a different night because Arya and Emily have gone to the movies, and when Spencer calls Hannah, she says, oh, Emily's mad at me for not being mad at you, and things. So I think a few days have passed for Emily to kind of like stew in her anger and kind of make the girls choose sides in a way. Hannah also says that she's reading a book and that she's read 3 books in 1 week. And obviously we hadn't seen this reading hobby of Hannah's yet. So again, I think a few days have passed. And she also says she's not seeing Travis anymore because she wants to take things slower. So again, I feel like they wouldn't have just decided that the day after having just kissed. But yeah.
It's the 3rd book of his I've read this week.
Is Travis reading them to you?
No, I'm not seeing him anymore. Decided not to rush into anything.
Also at some point in one of these 3 episodes, Hannah goes to Ravenswood. She's in the series finale of Ravenswood. She goes there and she speaks to Caleb and they kind of end things a bit more amicably. It's never mentioned in the show that she leaves. Like, not any point does she say to anyone that she's going to Ravenswood. Like, you would not know that she is in Ravenswood just from watching these 3 episodes. But at some point in these 3 episodes, she goes to Ravenswood. But yeah, at some point she goes to Ravenswood. And I think it happened between episode 16 and episode 17. Because in episode 16, she like kisses Travis and she's still very much upset about Caleb. And then things are still a little bit up in the air about them, I guess. So then she goes to Ravenswood and kind of gets the closure that she wants and needs. And then when she like comes, and then her and Travis kind of start seeing each other again. So I think maybe it happened somewhere here, which again to me indicates that there must have been some kind of jump between like this episode and I don't know, when she starts seeing Travis again properly. So I'm just gonna go with, what should we go with, like 3 days? But anyway, in episode 17, major plot points that we have is that Mona and Mike begin dating. We also have Spencer discovers that Ezra is board shorts. So board shorts is the kind of nickname that Ali gave to a guy she was seeing that summer that they also think could be A. And then Spencer finds out that Ezra is board shorts. And also, A does dental work on Hannah. No joke. No joke. A literally puts her under and then leaves in a message in between her teeth. Also, on the third day of this episode, because like I said, there's 3 days, on the third day, Emily mentions to Aria that her dad is making her co-direct the spring play with Ezra. As a British gal, this isn't really my area of expertise. We don't really do things like that. We did do like plays, I think. I don't know, I didn't really remember. That wasn't really my forte. I had way too much stage fright for that. I wanted to audition once and then I chickened out and left. Anyway, so I don't really know how this thing works, but apparently like the spring play is a big deal. To me, starting to organize the spring play in November seems a bit much, but then when I like actually Googled it, in an American article, I saw someone say it is spring musical season at our area high schools, and some of them are about to share what they've been toiling over all winter. So I guess maybe you guys do start planning your spring play in winter, so maybe that's not that weird that that Emily starts directing with Ezra in November. Maybe that's not that weird. I don't know. But that also happens in this episode.
Yeah, 4x18, and I counted 3 days in this episode, and this is kind of the lead up to the reveal of like Ezra, you know, being found out by the liars. So this is when Spencer finds out that he's board shorts by going to the bar. I think it's called the something in the Huntsman or something. And basically she goes there to try and figure out who Board Shorts is, and Ezra sat there and he's drinking Board Shorts ale. We also know that this is on a Wednesday, and then on the Thursday Alison calls Shauna asking her for money, and on the Friday Spencer buys more drugs at school. So on the Friday night, Aria goes to Ezra's cabin with him, and they're just, you know, getting closer and everything, and he's kind of trying to convince her that he should be the one that she trusts the most and all this stuff, like more than her friends. And we get, on the Saturday, Ezra in his lair, and the iconic evil chickpea scene when he sends Aria out to the shop so he can go and do his surveillance downstairs in the basement. Also in this episode, Spencer tells Hannah and Emily about her theory about Ezra, but she doesn't want to tell Aria yet because she doesn't feel like she has enough evidence to, so she recruits the other girls to try and help her, you know, be able to tell Aria. 4x19, I counted just the 1 day. So I assumed that a whole day had passed, because it was Saturday the last time we saw them in 4x18, and then now in 4x19 they're in school. But in like running alongside this scene of them at school is Aria and Ezra in the car, and she specifically mentions that it's Sunday night and she has school tomorrow. So they're also talking about the Goldberg variations, and it sounds like there's some kind of choir or something, so it seems like maybe they went to school on a Sunday to some kind of choir club as an excuse to sneak into Ezra's office, I think, when they obviously knew he wouldn't be there because it's a Sunday.
I'm thinking that it's a Sunday night and I still have a lot of homework to do.
Then we have 4x20. So this is Free Fall. This is a big episode. We have 2 days in this one, and we have the kind of intervention is supposed to be for Aria to tell her about Ezra, but it actually ends up being about Spencer and the girls finding out that she's addicted to ADHD pills. Also, this episode takes place on Monday because, like I said, this episode took place on a Sunday, and the girls actually go and they see Aria Sunday night. They're about to tell her, but they see her kissing Ezra, so they're like, okay, this is actually going to be a lot trickier than we thought. And then at the beginning of this episode, Hannah says, oh, I thought we all went home to like go to sleep. So we know that this takes place Monday morning.
Okay, I thought that after we saw Aria lip-locking with the devil, we went home to calm down and crash.
And even though Spencer has kind of obviously they've lost trust in her a little bit because of what, like, they don't really know whether to believe what she's saying or not anymore. Arya it's still kind of in the back of her mind, and she ends up going to Ezra's cabin and she discovers that he's writing a book about Alicent and that he knew Alicent. And not only that, he also knew who the girls were when he met Arya. So that is just so insane. One of the most insane plot points this show has ever done, to be honest.
Okay, so moving on to 4x21. She's come undone. We only have one day in this episode, and it's basically about the aftermath of Arya finding out about Ezra. And she trashes his apartment. She's going to tell the principal about their relationship. And also in this episode, Spencer ends up going to rehab for her drug problem. We also have that Emily confides in Paige that Alicent is alive, trusting her to keep that information a secret. But of course, she's Paige, so she doesn't, and she ends up telling the police that Alicent is alive. And finally, Hannah kisses Holbrook in this episode as well. But that's kind of the last we see of their relationship. That doesn't go anywhere after that. Then we have 4x22. And in this episode, I only counted one day. However, we have a 3-day time jump between 21 and 22. And we know this because at the end of 21, Arya says that she just needs to get away from Rosewood for a little while. She ends up going to Syracuse University with her dad, and she ends up having a little brief fling with this guy called Riley. And this is also confirmed by the fact that Spencer says she was in rehab for 3 days, and when we start episode 22, she's getting out of rehab. So yeah, 3 days between episode 21 and episode 22.
It was 3 days in rehab, Mom. I really did not need so many sweaters.
Again, those are kind of the main plot points of episode 22. The only other thing is that Hannah and Travis have started dating again because they kind of didn't see each other for a little while. Like after she went to go and see Caleb in Ravenswood, like I said, she had like a kind of brief flirtation with Holbrook, and now she's back together with Travis. I don't know, actually, hold on. I don't know why I said we only had one day. That is not true. I think I was getting confused with the other episode. We actually have 5. So we have 5 days in this episode, not 1 day. It was 1 day for 21, 5 days for 22. And those consist of 2 days that we actually saw, and also, yeah, that 3-day time jump there. If someone actually says these amount of days have passed, I include them in the tally. If someone just alludes to a non-specific one, like the 2 weeks, then, like I said, I'm doing 2 totals at the end. One of the exact days that we actually see that have passed, and then another of more of the amount of days that's indicated to have passed. So now we're on to the penultimate episode of season 4. That is 4x23, Unbridled. And we're told that there is a 48 time period before the bridal show, okay? So most of it takes place that night on the bridal show, but it is 48 hours before when the episode actually starts. So if we count the 2 days that pass in that 48 time period, and then we also count the day of the bridal shower, we have a total of 3 days in this episode. So major points of this episode: Spencer had a sober companion that she got when she came out of rehab, Dean. He then ends up being fired by Veronica because she thinks that Dean is getting too close to Spencer, so he is fired in this episode. We also have Spencer thinking that she actually was the one to kill Bethany. She thinks she had a kind of drug-induced haze where she doesn't remember anything, and she was the one that killed Bethany that night, but just doesn't remember it or doesn't realize, because everyone seems to think she had something to do with Alison's death. And so she's like, okay, why do all these people think I'm so suspicious? And if it isn't Alison in that grave, then there's another girl that's her, and maybe I did that to her. Ella also comes back in this episode, so I can't remember when it was that she left, but she left at some point to go to Vienna. And like I said, they said it was going to be a year, but she ends up coming back in this episode in the same month that she left. And she tells Arya that Zach actually proposed to her. Now we're moving on to the finale of season 4. So this is A is for Answers, and that is 4x24. And actually, even though this is a huge episode, okay, we have that the girls go to New York and they meet up with Allison, and Allison explains everything that happened the night of her disappearance. There are still some plot holes, but that's fine. If you are still confused or actually never really thought about the night that Allison disappeared, I have a whole deep dive video on it, kind of similar to this one where I went through the entire timeline of that day, that weekend, and everyone that Allison spoke to, and kind of how it worked and who killed who, everything like that. I have a whole deep dive video on that if you want to go and watch that. But yes, so Allison explains, you know, things that happened the night that she died. She also assures Spencer that Spencer did not hurt Bethany. Well, I guess at this point they don't know that she's called Bethany, but didn't hurt the girl in the grave, the Jane Doe. So Spencer's obviously very relieved about that. Holbrook believes, you know, obviously that Allison's alive because of the tip from Paige, but also, you know, now that all the girls are missing, everyone assumes they're, you know, together with Allison. Oh, I forgot to mention, in episode 23, we did also find out that Ezra resigned from Rosewood, obviously after everything that happened with Arya, and the fact that now Malcolm isn't his, he doesn't need that job anymore, so he does resign from teaching at Rosewood High. Now, speaking of Ezra, as the girls are, you know, like hiding out with Allison, and she's telling them what's happened to her, she says, as long as A exists, I can't come back to Rosewood. So the girls decide they need to figure out who A is. At this time, they are chased by A up onto the roof, and Ezra shows up and he says, you know, I know who you are, like you can't escape. And A actually has a gun, but they manage to get it off of her, and Hannah points the gun at A, literally points the gun right at A, and A still manages to escape, but not before shooting Ezra. And we kind of leave the series finale not knowing if he is going to live or not. And then to round out the absolute madness that is this episode, we also find out that Jessica De Laurentiis has been murdered, and we see her being buried. And like I said, even though all of this stuff goes down, right, this one night, it's the bridal shower, it's them going to New York and seeing Allison explaining everything, them going, you know, up onto the roof, Ezra getting shot, them seeing A, Jessica De Laurentiis being buried. It's all the same night. It is all the same night as the bridal shower, and therefore we don't add any new days because we're still in the same day as episode 23. Time is but a construct in the, you know, the Pretty Little Lies universe. So because that is no more days added to our counter, we end season 24 with 24 episodes, but 55 days. And like I said, this is only going up to the mid-series finale of season 5 because the Christmas special episode takes place on Christmas. as it would, Fork, Fan and Kitchen. So we're going to start obviously with the first episode of season 5. And surprisingly enough, once again, this all takes place in the same night. This all takes place in the same night as Unbridled and A is for Answers. So we don't add any new days because it is dark. Like, the girls come back to Rosewood, it's dark. The girls, you know, go back and kind of recoup after everything that happened with Allison and go to see, it's dark the whole time. Like, we have not reached the next day yet. So yeah, no new days added for the first episode of season 5. But we do get a kind of time jump in a way because Veronica says it has been 1 month. Okay. She says, she claims, and we know that Veronica's a lawyer, so like she's not making these false claims. She says that it has been 1 month since the girls first saw Allison.
This was taken a few weeks ago.
Oh my God. The photograph that Detective Holbrook showed me of the girls with Allison was taken a month ago.
Because someone, obviously we assume A, sent a picture to the Rosewood police of Allison in Spencer's garden when all of the girls saw her. Okay? So they know this is the first time they saw Allison. Well, they assume it's the first time, but they don't know that. But they know that they definitely saw her this night. Veronica claims that 1 month has passed since Grave New World. Right? She says 1 month has passed, which puts us in December. That is probably out of anything else you could explain away, is concrete evidence that we are now in December. This all takes place over the course of 1 month. Which, like, to me, obviously that makes sense. Like, you know, 10 episodes across 1 month. Like, that makes complete sense. And if we add these days up, right, like we have 11 days, 12, 13, 16, 19, 21, 22, 24, 25, 28, 32, 35. Like the maths is a little bit off, a tiny bit. But that makes sense. Like, do you see what I mean? That if you don't put in the Christmas episode, the timeline makes sense. But then as soon as you put that Mona died on Thanksgiving, that's when you get this mess. 5X01. Veronica says it's been 1 month since Grave New World. Major plot points for this episode is that Ezra survives. He wakes up and he tells Arya that Shauna is A. Shauna then shows up to where the other girls are because Arya's at the hospital with Ezra, but the other girls are hiding in a theatre in New York. And Shauna shows up with a gun, is threatening to kill the girls, and Arya knocks her off of the stage and she hits her head, bleeds out, and she dies. And then they go back to Rosewood thinking that A is dead. Allison goes in to the police station and claims that she was kidnapped, not that she ran away, which obviously leaves the rest of the girls like, what the fuck? Why are we lying? And what makes this so insane is that, like I said, before the Halloween train, we have Pretty Dirty Secrets, which is the webisodes, right? But Shauna is first introduced, I think it is in episode 17. Okay, so even though like 1.5 seasons have passed since this episode, in the canon of this being 1 month, Shauna shows up to Rosewood, right? Works at the costume shop. Somehow, you know, dated Paige over the summer. So she's lived there for a while, but we only just meet her in the 17th episode. She like falls in love with Jenna, starts dating Jenna and getting involved in all kinds of weird shit with her. And then somehow like not becomes A, but just wants to get revenge for Jenna. And, you know, is willing to kill Allison for revenge on Jenna. She's fallen so in love with Jenna that she is willing to kill Allison, you know, to avenge her. And then she dies, right? In 1 month, she has, you know, met the girls, fallen in love with Jenna so intensely, you know, all this stuff, that she knows all these secrets. She knows about Cece. She knows that Allison's alive. All this stuff, is trying to help Allison, but then isn't really, is trying to help Jenna, and she dies. She's literally introduced and dies in the same month. But in reality, we see her for a good 1.5 seasons. In this one, we have that Jessica De Laurentiis' body is found. And again, somehow, the first half of this episode still takes place this same day. So we only have 1 additional day because the first part takes place in amongst all this still. Then we have 5X03, and in this episode we get like a big continuation of time. So we have 7 days. It's Jessica De Laurentiis' funeral, and the reason that I've added quite a few days, I will explain. Because technically speaking, in this, we only see like 1 day or maybe 2 But the reason that I've added a few in is because of the timeline of events. So we have a montage of Alison, very Bella Swan coded, and it's her, obviously, you know, she's found out about her mum's passing, and it seems like we're kind of watching her wait until the funeral, because it goes from like night back to day, back to night, back to day, like that kind of thing. And so I assumed this to be representative of days passing, and I counted that as 4 days with sunrises and sunsets. I counted 4 days, and then also counted Jessica's funeral as 1 day, because in the scene after that, the girls were at school, and I just don't think like they would have gone to school on the same day as her mum's funeral, and that must have been like a day off, like, surely. So then that was 2 days, and they also had different makeup in the next scene, so I was like, there's no way this is the same day. And the principal says they've had a stressful week, so that must mean it's been 1 week since Alison returned in this episode. So that's why I've gone with 7 days on that one.
The four of you have had a very stressful week.
But yeah, like I said, Jessica's funeral, and also Sydney is introduced in this episode, so this is the first time we meet her in the series. Then we have 5X04. Honestly, again, a bit of a filler episode. We don't really have much notable going on. We have 2 days, and the big kind of like mystery is that Spencer thinks that Peter could have been the one that killed Jessica. So now we're moving on to 5X05, and in this one I counted 3 days. So another continuity error that I think is funny in this one is, like I mentioned, they will mention things that shouldn't exist in the year 2011. One of those being that Paige, Sydney and Emily go to a Frozen sing-along event, and yeah, Frozen didn't come out until 2013. So somehow in 2011 they skipped forward to the future and decided to bring Frozen back with them. Also, when Arya left Ezra's apartment in the 4th episode, that was at nighttime, and we open episode 5 also at nighttime, but they're in a different outfit. Like, Arya's in a different outfit, and she's also with Ezra, whereas she just left his apartment and left him there. So I distinguished that was a completely different night, probably just like the next night when they see Alison. This is a big episode. This is Miss Me times 100, and that is because it is the 100th episode, and therefore we get a lot going on in this episode. In this episode, Alison returns to school, Arya and Ezra have sex and basically get back together, even though, like, we literally just had that she found out about his book, but then he gets shot, and I guess, you know, she has to get back together with him. We also have the Emily and Alison kiss in this episode. I don't remember if I mentioned, but her and Paige broke up because she snitched on Ali to the police. And so they kiss in this episode. They also find out the name of the girl in the grave, which obviously we know is Bethany. And then at the end, and Caleb returns in this episode as well. Caleb comes back from Rosewood in this episode. Forgot to mention that. And at the end of the episode, Toby's house is blown up. And then because of this, they kind of realize that A is back, and they get the first A text. Well, actually, Alison technically gets an A text before this, but the first group A text of season 5. Also, it's revealed that Hannah's like dyed her hair. She's having a little bit of an identity crisis now that Alison is back. So this is kind of, we're entering into her gothic era right now, which is honestly probably my like favorite Hannah look. I'm not even kidding. I love it. Then we're moving on to 5X06. Oh God, that's so ugly. My handwriting's getting worse, guys. And in this episode, I counted 2 days. And in this one, basically Alison tries to run away again, and Hannah's going to help her because she kind of just wants to get rid of her. And we also have that. And when she does this, she gets attacked by A. And also Hannah and Travis break up because, like I said, Caleb is now back. And so her and Caleb, now that he's back, can tell that she's like distracted and she's not really in their relationship 100%, so he ends things. Moving on to 5X07, I just counted 1 day for this one. And in terms of major plot points, Hannah and Caleb get back together like officially. And also Aria begins volunteering at Radley. I also forgot to mention that Hannah has started drinking. She started drinking kind of, when Allison was coming back, and then Caleb, who's traumatized by everything that happened in Ravenswood, also has a drinking problem. So they're kind of like fueling each other's alcoholism, basically. Then we have 5X08, and in this one I counted 2 days. So in this one, like I mentioned, Hannah and Caleb, their drinking is getting worse. Toby also joins the police academy. He decides that he wants to be able to keep Spencer safe, and he feels the only way he can do that is by being a police officer. So we also have that. Spencer is hit by a horse while trying to her and Emily are trying to investigate a link between Jessica and Bethany, and maybe why, the De Laurentises are connected and why Bethany ended up in Allison's grave. Also, we have that Hannah is hit on by Zach. So Zach is Ella's now fiance and big creep. Hannah comes in to get some food and he ends up hitting on her, which I hate that scene. I think it's one of the most upsetting scenes. Just that whole storyline is definitely one of the most upsetting storylines of the show. Then moving on to 5X09. In this one, I only counted 1 day. And in terms of major plot points, we meet a guy called Cyrus who confesses to Allison's fake kidnapping. So obviously all the liars are like, well, surely this man's innocent because this kidnapping never happened. Caleb also goes and punches Zach when Hannah tells him, what happened between them. And originally when Hannah tells Aria about Zach, she's kind of reluctant to believe her, which is not my favorite Aria scene. And but she does end up telling Ella about it, and Ella then breaks up with Zach. So she calls off the engagement. We also find out in this episode that Sydney and Jenna are friends, which is not a bond that we knew existed before then. Okay, guys, we're getting to the end now. We're getting to the end. So we have 5X10. And in this episode, the girls start to kind of turn on Allison. They find out, she basically confesses that she actually hired Cyrus to confess to her kidnapping to then make it seem real, and then allowed him to basically escape after that. So the girls are like, what the hell is going on in the House of Commons? And they kind of start to think that maybe she could be or at least that she's not trustworthy. And Hannah also overcomes her drinking problem in this episode and kind of starts to want to better her life. And in this episode, I counted 2 days. Then we have the penultimate episode that we're going to talk about today, and that is 5X11. And in this episode, there was only 1 day that passed. So the kind of B plot is that Spencer and Hannah ask Toby to speak to Caleb and try to help him stop his drinking, which he does. And at first, Caleb is very reluctant, but then he has a heart-to-heart with Hannah about everything that happened in Ravenswood, and he decides that he's going to join her in this kind of like, healthier lifestyle. Also in this episode, Spencer gets a DVD from Melissa. So she'd left it behind when she went to go move to London, and it's her confessing to the fact that she was the one that buried Bethany. She says that she saw Allison and Spencer arguing. She then found someone who looked like Allison, and she thought that Spencer had hit her and killed her, and she didn't want anybody to know that Spencer had done it, so she ended up burying her. But now obviously she knows that it wasn't Allison in that grave, and that when she buried her, she wasn't dead. So technically, Melissa buried her alive and killed her. And at the end of this episode, Spencer also tells this to all the girls, I think, or is it just Arya? Maybe it's just Arya and Emily that are there. I can't remember. At the end of this episode, the girls break in to Radley and look through Bethany's files and actually find out that Jessica was having an affair with Bethany's dad and that she hated Jessica for it. Then Spencer is supposed to meet Toby because he's having his graduation ceremony from the police academy. She's obviously late because she's at Radley, and he calls her, and while he's on the phone to her in the car, he gets into a car accident. So that's the end of that episode. And again, it's kind of left on that cliffhanger of, is Toby going to survive? Spoiler alert, he does. We've made it to the final episode in this ridiculous saga, and that is 5x12, taking this one to the grave, and that is the mid-series finale for series 5. So in this episode, we have 3 days that take place, with the final day in this episode being Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving to all my American viewers. I think as I'm filming this, it was yesterday. So Mona's death takes place on Thanksgiving in this episode, but then we get a 36-hour flashback, and we actually start this episode with Allison doing a lie detector, and the girls go to Mona and ask her for their help because they're worried they don't know what Allison's going to say, and Mona says that she believes Allison is A. So I think I have my Thanksgiving lore correct in that it takes place on the final Thursday of November, I think. And this year, that was the 28th of November. But in 2011, which, like I said, is where we still are in the canon, it took place on the 24th of November 2011, which again, like I said, was Thursday. Somehow, in the ridiculousness of this show, episode 9 of season 4, okay, takes place on November 18th. Like I said, day before Emily's birthday. Okay, so all of this, technically speaking, takes place in 6 days. Okay? 6 days. We have, what is it, maybe 20 episodes? No, more than that, maybe like 30 episodes that take place in 6 days. Also in this episode, Paige and Emily get back together after, you know, obviously Emily's now turned on Allison. Also, like I said, Toby is fine from his car crash, but he did break his leg. And I think Spencer says he's going to be in a cast for a month or something. Spencer is then arrested for Bethany Young's murder. I guess, you know, Allison was cleared, and they think their like kind of theory is that Spencer murdered Bethany in order to gain favor with Allison because Bethany hated Jessica. I don't really know. I don't really get the logic. You know, Rosewood Police, the logic's not there. It's not great, but they feel like they have enough to arrest her, and so they do. And then obviously, last but not least, Mona dies. And the girls go, obviously not Spencer, Hannah, Emily, Arya and Ezra go to her house to meet her, and they find the crime scene. There's blood everywhere, but her body is missing, and then we end up seeing it in the trunk of A's car at the end of this episode, and we're kind of being led to believe that A is Allison because they show the black hoodie with the blonde hair. Then we have a 30-day time jump from this episode to 5x13. 5x13, like I said, is the Christmas special, how they stole Christmas. And this takes place on/around Christmas. Then from 5x14, we are officially in 2012. The never-ending November is over, girlies. War is over. We're free from the chains. And so with season 5, we have 12 episodes, but 25 days. So in terms of the total, November 2011 has 47 episodes in total. Then, like I said, it depends. If you just want to count specifically all the days that we saw, I have to go down all the way down here. So if you want to count literally just the days that we saw, just the days that I counted, we have 104 days, which works out about 3.5 months. Or if you want to do it with the time jumps included, so yeah, Caleb saying 2 weeks had passed, 2 weeks passing here when Spencer said she found out about Toby, 4 days passing here, 3 days passing there, that takes our total up to 149 days, which is more like almost 5 months, basically 4.9 months. So between the 1st of November 2012 and the 24th of November, I guess to be fair, you could add, if you wanted to, you could add like the last few days of November, so like 6, so then you could take that up to like 110 if you're counting November as a as a whole month, but I'm just counting it until like we last see them. 104 days or 3.5 months, or if you want to include the time that we didn't see, 149 days and 4.9 months, almost 5 months, fit into November of 2011 in the Pretty Little Liars universe. So, as a little recap, in the month of November 2011, because like I said, November only has 30 days, so supposedly in 30 days, cough cough, 104 days, Mona leaves Radley, then falsely confesses to the murder of Wilden and goes back into Radley and then gets back out of Radley again. Oh, also in one of these episodes, I think it might be 501, I think Cece is technically convicted for Wilden's murder, but she manages to escape and she flees to Paris. Also throughout this, Mona manages to start and maintain a relationship with Mike. Meredith begins teaching at Rosewood High and dating Byron. She then is almost burnt to death and then drugs Aria, holds her hostage, and then is kicked out of the house by Byron and never seen again. Spencer had a real doozy of a November, okay? Poor Spenny was going through it in November. So she discovers that Toby's on the A team. Then they break up. She then hires a PI to follow him and then finds out, well, thinks that she finds him dead in the woods. She also kisses Ren. She then goes into Radley, spends some time in Radley, joins the A team in order to get Toby back, and then also kidnaps Malcolm in this time. Then is free from the A team. Toby is also free from the A team. Then she develops an addiction to ADHD pills and then goes into rehab. She also thinks she could have killed Bethany, but then Melissa confesses that she killed Bethany. But then because of the, evidence and everything stacked against her, Spencer is still arrested for Bethany's murder. She had her heart broken, went through grief, she went through the stages. She went to Radley, she came out of Radley, she joined the A-team, she left the A-team. She got addicted to drugs, then she went into rehab, then she came out of rehab. Then, finally, last nail in the coffin, she gets arrested for murder. Speaking of Toby, like I mentioned, he joined the A-team. He continues to work with the A-team even after they rumble him and find out he's on the A-team to try and figure out what happened to his mum. He then gets a huge settlement from Radley because he's basically threatening to sue them. Then his house is blown up. Oh, and his stepsister almost drowns. His house is blown up. He joins the police academy in the 8th episode, then graduates from the police academy like 3 episodes later in episode 11. Basically, he becomes a cop in like 3 days. It's like, that would never happen. It's so funny to me that he literally just leaves for like a day, comes back, and now he's qualified to arrest people and go through evidence and work in the police station. The Liars also almost die when the Thornhill Lodge is blown up in the season 3 finale. In terms of Ezra finds out that he has a son, which he didn't know about, and then finds out that that son is moving away, then finds out that son isn't even his, okay? So he basically becomes a dad for just one arc and then finds out that that child is not his. He starts teaching at Rosewood again and then leaves teaching at Rosewood again and also gets shot but lives. Jason falls down an elevator shaft and then disappears from a hospital. We don't see him again until his sister comes back from the dead, but then his mum dies. So that's rough. Caleb though, oh my days. Caleb was going through it. Like not as much as Spenny, but I'd say he's probably a close second for November, just taking him for an absolute ride. So he finds out that his uncle is his dad. Then he's starting to have a bit of a relationship with him. Then A ruins that relationship and then they reconnect again after that. Then he leaves Rosewood for Ravenswood with Miranda. Miranda literally dies the day he gets there, or maybe the second day. Literally dies. And then he's got this whole new group of friends. He's hanging out with a ghost because Miranda comes back as a ghost. So he has to, comprehend the fact that ghosts are now real. And then he falls from a building, almost dies in... this show's so ridiculous, I love it. In that state of purgatory, or whatever you want to call it, between the afterlife and, real life. He meets Miranda there and wants to stay with her because they're soulmates, but she encourages him to go back, and so he lives. He then comes back to Rosewood and breaks up with Hannah. Then he goes back to Ravenswood to figure out that whole mess. It basically turns out that his ancestors, his and Miranda's ancestors were like soulmates and dated, and there was this whole pact in the town. Like I said, go and watch my Ravenswood deep dive if you want to know all about that whole mess. Yeah, all kinds of spooky shit. Then he comes back and has an alcohol problem. And then him and Hannah get back together. Then he, overcomes his alcohol problem, and him and Hannah are happily together at the end of November. Speaking of Hannah, she's devastated when Caleb breaks up with her and thinks that he's left her for Miranda, basically. She then goes to Ravenswood, where she finds out that Miranda is dead, and about kind of the ghost stuff. Not properly, but he does tell her like some stuff, and she promises not to tell anybody. And it is literally like she never even went. If you just watch Pretty Little Liars, there is no indication that she even went and found out all this weird shit. Then Ashley hits Wilden with her car. Ashley is framed for his murder. Hannah also gets arrested because she's bearing a gun, so she almost gets convicted with tampering with evidence. Ashley is then released from prison. Hannah kisses Travis and she kisses Holbrook, but then she goes back to Travis and begins dating him until Allison comes back. She starts to have a bit of an identity crisis, dyes her hair, has her drinking problem, breaks up. Her and Travis break up. She gets back together with Caleb. Aria plays stepmom with Ezra for the first bit of, for the last bit of season 3. Like I said, she's also drugged by Meredith. She also kisses Ezra's brother while she's still dating Ezra. Then she breaks up with him because the whole Malcolm thing is too much, and by breaking up with him, he can then go back to teaching at Rosewood High. Then she dates Jake, but then she cheats on Jake with Ezra, gets back together with Ezra secretly while he's still teaching at Rosewood High, then finds out that Ezra was lying to her this whole time and that he was writing a book about her, and, well, a book about Allison. So yeah, she breaks up with him, then she trashes his apartment, then she hooks up with Riley, then Ezra is shot, and she gets back together with Ezra, and she also kills Shauna. Emily injures her shoulder and is no longer able to swim. She turns 18, and her family gets investigated by family services, only for that storyline to just kind of go away. A drives a car into her living room. She is dating Paige until Paige betrays her. Then she breaks up with Paige. Then she kisses Allison. But then when she doesn't trust Allison anymore, she goes back to Paige. Ella is attacked by a bunch of wasps in a car. Then she goes to Vienna. Then she comes back from Vienna. Her and Zach get engaged. But then when Zach hits on Hannah, she breaks off the wedding and is basically just riding the wave of that. Jenna, who could see when we first started this on the Halloween train, then loses her sight again and she almost drowns. She moves to New York because she's so scared of Cece, and then she comes back when Shauna dies. Like I said, she falls in love with Shauna somewhere along this line, and then when Shauna dies, she's heartbroken and also moves back to Rosewood. Allison is revealed to be alive. She then, like I said, moves back to Rosewood, tries to flee, then gets scared into staying, kisses Emily, goes back to school, turns on the liars. Well, the liars kind of like turn on her, and she starts forming an army of her own. Oh, and her mother dies, and she has to go to her own mum's funeral. And she adopts a dog, but then the dog disappears after it finds Jessica's body. And then lastly, Mona dies. After all that, she dies. So yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot to happen in 1 month. That is serious PLL mind-bending logic right there. But that is it for today's video. Thank you for joining me on this ridiculous journey that we just went on, trying to explain how all this could possibly fit in 1 month. But luckily I got it up just before November ends for us in reality. So yeah, let me know down in the comments, do you just kind of pretend that this isn't all November and it just goes into the next year? What do you think is the craziest thing that happens? Like, what's the most unbelievable thing that happens in this November? You know, it's ridiculous, and that's why we love it. So thank you guys, like I said, so much for watching this video with me. Hopefully it made sense. I feel like it was so convoluted. I tried to make as much sense of it as possible. Let me know down in the comments any other Pretty Little Lies deep dives you guys want me to do. I'm super excited for the videos I have coming in December. My YouTube channel, like, she's back. Okay, guys, she's truly back. Don't expect anything other than huge sweaters, though, because it is bloody freezing in the UK at the minute. But I'm still going to stand here in this freezing cold room and make these deep dives for you guys. So, yeah. Get excited for those. If you have any specific videos, Pretty Little Lies, Gossip Girl, 90210, Desperate Housewives, you can always, recommend them down in the comments. Yeah, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. You can follow me on Instagram. You can follow my second channel. I'm going to try and post on there more. And yeah, that is it. I love you all very, very much. Thank you for allowing me to ramble on about this show that we all love so much, and I will see you guys in my next video, and it will not be 2 months from now. I promise you that. So yeah, I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.